But before we move on to the NFL, we have one big segment to go in college football, and that is our game of the week. A couple of teams we have not talked about yet, and that's the two Big Ten teams, Penn State and Oregon. Oregon's still a defeated team. Penn State, this is another opportunity for James Franklin in a big game situation to try to prove something. I've said before, I have been doing the Penn State post-game shows all season long, so I know more about Penn State this year than I've ever known for a long time. And one thing that I have noticed, and I'm being honest here, is that, and I'm with everybody else on James Franklin, so that has not changed. But this season, this team is his best team, and he doesn't have the best players he's had, but it's his best team. They keep responding week in and week out, game in and game out. You know, when something happened in the past, it would snowball in a negative way. That's not happening to them this year. But still, they're one big test and they failed. Here's another big test. So if they can win this game, they are now, in my mind, I think if they win this game, not just because they're playing number one, I think if they would have just beaten a top 5 team, I'd feel this way, but they happen to be number one, so it's going to be an easy remark. I think if they win this game, I think they turn into, in my opinion, maybe the favorites. Not that I'd say it out loud, because that would all of a sudden put all the pressure on Penn State, and that's not a spot they want to be in. But they're talented enough to do that. The question is, can they do it? So what do you think about the game, Tony?
I mean, it's a winnable game. I want to know real quick, because I'm taking you off topic here, but since you do the Penn State post game, why did he do that to Mike Locksley?
Yeah, that's my question too.
He does not like him.
I mean,
they go back a long way.
Is it him
or
the fact that he got passed over for the Maryland job a couple of times?
They go back a long way. There's a lot of bad blood there. Okay. So, that was not a surprise. Matter of fact, I like Penn State because of that.
My nickname for Franklin is the merciless bully.
Yeah,
that crazy.
Yeah, that was a situation.
Look what he did to Kent State. In fact, I wrote up this game this week. They outgained Kent State by 652 yards in a 56-0 win. 652 yards. I mean, well, now Kent State was 0-12 on the season, but you knew they were there to begin with. I mean, you should be playing your third and fourth stringers if you're up by that margin. And if you're a fourth string, Kent State, I think should be reasonably competitive against a fourth string unit on Penn State.
Yeah. Well,
maybe not the second or third.
Just keep it in mind for next year. Everybody, keep it in mind. Lock it down. No matter how big that spread is next year, take Penn State against Maryland because he can't stand the guy and he's going to run it up. And that's something that you want when you're giving up that many points. So, what do you think about the game in general, though, guys? Because, again, I actually thought the spread was going to be close to 6 or 7. Even though I like Penn State in the game, I did not expect them to get this much respect. Now, I don't know if that's, again, because they are getting a lot of respect, or after what what happened a couple weeks ago at Wisconsin, and keep in mind they're a little bit banged up. But
they may have been looking at, even though it was 2 weeks, they may have been looking ahead to the Washington game last week. In fact, I was going to mention that Oregon is now 24-2 since the start of last season. Their 2 losses last year were both 3-point losses to the ultimate national runner-up quarterfinalist, whatever it was, Washington. So they lost to Michigan. That this is a very strong Oregon team. They outgained 7 of their 12 opponents by 200 yards or more, and they averaged they had a better yards per play differential in all 12 games this year. This has been a very dominant and consistent team. And they also dealt. I mean, look. Other than the game to Michigan, they dealt otherwise unbeaten Ohio State, their only loss, and they dealt otherwise unbeaten Boise State, their only loss. This has been a very, very solid team all year. I also was surprised that the line was as low as it is, but I happen to like Oregon in this game, though the stats overall can certainly make a case for Penn State. But then again, Greg, you mentioned this is a big game, and it's an especially big game for Oregon considering what happened last year when they also were in pretty much control. If they had won that championship, Pac-12 championship game against Washington, they would have been in the Final Four.
Yep.
Notwithstanding Florida State.
I like Drew Aller and his ability to make plays, but nobody to me makes more plays that I trust right now, especially with Miami's QB out, than Dylan Gabriel. Especially since he has Johnson back, so it's good to see Tess Johnson back. It makes a world of difference. So my place is going to be on the over here with no weather in Indy. So
I was also going to mention, by the way, how the artificial surface in Indianapolis and the indoors helps Oregon's speed.
Yeah.
What's the total? What's the total? Victor?
High 40?
The total
maybe.
opened at 50.5. It's down to 49.5.
Yeah, high 40.
It's come down about a point. Both teams are 5-7 over under on the season. 5 overs, 7 unders. You got a couple of 30-point plus game offenses, 2 very good defenses, both allowing less than 17 points per game on the season. The point spread also surprises me, like you guys as well. I was anticipating about a 6-point spread in the game, particularly given Penn State's modus operandi is just a plain flat-out underdogs. I mean, they've been horrific as underdogs since the 2018 season now. 1-12 ATS as underdogs of 14 or less points. Penn State, just flat out. So, yeah, they can run up the score against the bad teams, and they can James Franklin can inform his alumni to bet the farm when they're laying points against the bad teams.
Or Maryland.
But as an underdog, this team just does not compete against the better teams in college football. The favorite in the Big Ten Championship has gone a perfect 3-0 straight up in ATS in the last 3 years. The last 5 Big Ten Championship games have averaged 44.6. I don't have a dog in the race as far as over-under goes. I can see potentially more points, especially because of the fact that the overs in indoor venues, dome stadiums, like in Indianapolis, have gone 37-28, about 57% over the total, going all the way back to 2005. And, of course, for references, the conferences this week that will be playing indoors are the Big Ten Conference, like this one, the Big 12, the MAC, and the SEC.
Yeah, Penn State's dropped 9 straight games straight up as a dog, which is not good. Oregon is...
Go ahead. I was going to mention one other thing here quickly. I'm going to throw 2 numbers out at you. Penn State, 21.7. Oregon, 19.8. That adds up to 41.5. That's not the average points these teams score or the average points these teams allow. It's the average margin of victory in these 2 teams combined 23 wins in 24 games this year. That's astounding, those numbers, because a lot of them are against pretty decent teams as well. So and of course we know what Penn State does when they can blow out teams. So at that total of 50, given that it's indoors and what you mentioned, Victor, that does seem suspiciously low.
Keep in mind too that the Big Ten championship game is similar to some other championship games where they're the conferences that have niched the divisions, and we know the Big Ten had a major advantage from one to another. So it was always the Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan side dominated the Wisconsin, Iowa side. Yeah. And so, so I wouldn't really worry too much. I'm always going to follow trends like that, but I wouldn't worry about it in this circumstance specifically. But we'll find out. This is a good way to keep that going or not, because those days are over. The other thing too is Oregon. Really, if you look at it, they haven't exactly played a very tough schedule. I mean, really. I mean, yes, they've got the Ohio State Boise State game, which everybody points out. But other than that, their other big wins, were Illinois, Michigan, and Washington. They've only beaten 5 bowl teams. That's it. So they have not had a gauntlet of a schedule, and that's something to consider. Penn State's played, I believe, 7 bowl teams, which is about average.
I take a look at their non-conference games, and Penn State played West Virginia, Bowling Green, and Kent State. Oregon did play an FCS team, had a great season, and is probably better than Kent State in Idaho. They're a 9-3 team in the FCS level, and they also played in non-conference games. Boise State and actually traditional rival early in the season, but no longer a conference member, Oregon State.
Yeah, I'm looking at this more for tell you the truth, because I don't think it matters much in this matchup, even though we're talking about it. I think it does matter when we're going to be next week previewing the playoffs. I think that's where it's going to matter more. This will be a 6th team. So this will give us a good gauge of where Oregon stands going into the playoffs, how they play against Penn State. Yeah. But we'll keep that in mind next week. But yeah, I agree. It's not like Penn State's had a juggernaut of a schedule compared to Oregon's. But yeah, I think we're all in agreement that the line is a little low. Does that mean as I go around for picks that I don't know if you guys have them? I know it really comes down to Andy and because since Vic's out, so Andy and Tony. So Tony, do you have a pick in this game?
The over, but one thing. So this is basically for obviously the conference championship, but it's for a bye and a home game, correct?
That's right.
Because there's no way that both of them.
Penn State might still be able to get. I think Penn State will still get a home game. I think they'll find a way to still get a home game because if you look at the brackets right now, all you have to do to get a home game is be like the 8th seed.
Yeah.
So even Ohio State's getting a home game.
Yeah.
I mean, Penn State though does have more to play for, so I would feel uncomfortable laying points in that situation, but I would not go against Oregon. They've seemingly won when they needed to, made plays when they've had to, so the over would be my call.
Yeah, keep in mind too that when they lost or when they struggled against Wisconsin, there was no Tez Johnson, as you mentioned, Tony, and keep in mind too they had a very early bye. So they were really coming to the point where guys were getting banged up and missing games, and they just needed a break. And that Wisconsin game, they were just very fortunate to not play a real good football team at that point.
They still outgained them, I think, by 100-something yards, a little over 100 yards.
So who do you like, Andy?
I'm going to point out something interesting. It's probably been pointed out elsewhere, but it's interesting. These four Power 4 conference games all involve teams that are in their first year in their new conferences. Oregon in the Big Ten, Texas in the SEC, Arizona State in the Big 12, and SMU in the ACC. So it's interesting. Do you want to do? And by the way, all 4 are favored this week too. Albeit a couple of short lines with SMU and Arizona State. Well, actually, all of them are really short lines. Do you want to do a 4-team money line parlay on the new kids on the block all succeeding, or do you want to play a 4-team money line parlay on, hey, not so fast, rookie? We're still know about this conference, and we know a few things that come down to our championship game. So just a little bit interesting that it's very unique that that all 4 of these conference games involve a newcomer, and B, that all of those newcomers are favored. I happen to like Oregon in the game. I also agree with the over. I think the site is going to help the Ducks, and they're playing again with a little chip on their shoulder from what happened last year. 2 3-point losses. You're not going to get in with 2 3-point losses in a 4-team playoff, but I still think over the past 2 years, the body of work that Oregon has displayed has been very impressive. And again, you pointed out the numbers for Penn State in the role of an underdog, which obviously means they're going up against a team that arguably is considered better than them, or at least depending upon the site, no worse than them. At some point, that's going to end. And even though I like Oregon in this spot and got a lot of reasons for them, I can see Penn State winning the game, but my money's on Oregon.
Yeah, Oregon has won 8 straight, covering 7 of their last 8 as a single-digit favorite, including 4-0 straight up ATS in their last 4.
By the way, how far back does that go, being single-digit favorites? Is that a couple of years?
I was just doing it myself, and I believe it was like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So because I know they weren't very often a single-digit favorite, so I just started to look at it myself, and I think we only go back no earlier. I would say 2021 the latest.
Yeah,